There is someone who is already living the life that you want, whose reality is what you are still dreaming of. If you're smart, you spend time studying them, and if you're dumb, you waste your time envying them. Humility is not there to help you. Humility is there to control you. What can be seen doesn't exist, okay? And people don't trust what they can't see. So if you don't highlight the things you've accomplished, then they don't exist in other people's eyes. So hold on, smash your past, Nikola Tesla, Thomas Edison, and Benjamin Franklin. You need to start thinking about your own self-interest and whether or not being humble will serve that interest. Ideally, you want to exude confidence so that you don't have to always talk about your accomplishments. People can just pick up on it just by being in your presence. That's just a fantasy that you have to create, and it's not hard. It really isn't hard. Hello, and welcome. This is the baddest bitch in the building. This is a podcast where we discuss how to milk every system and institution out there and how to use them to our advantage. So this could be the patriarchy, capitalism, women's beauty standards, you name it, we're going to milk it, okay? And we're doing this through the secret laws of power for women. My name is Nikki. I am your host and the baddest bitch in the building. Not to be confused with you, who's also the baddest bitch in the building, okay? Don't you ever forget that. If you're new here, don't forget to subscribe, like this podcast, rate it 5 stars so the other bad bitches can find it. If you want. You don't need to do it if you don't want to. And if you want to follow me on TikTok and Instagram, my info is in the show notes. Okay, I post highlights of each episode. I also post silly content. So if you want to see that, check it out. Okay, let's get into it. Okay, before we start, can we please talk about the presidential debate for 2 seconds? Like, it was really giving senile. I don't know, when people say it was sad to watch Biden fumble around and basically just act like an elderly person who, should be resting and not on the presidential stage. I don't know, guys. Is that sad? Like, to me, it just shows how power hungry some people are, that even when they are old and decrepit, like they still are, like they refuse to relinquish power. They're still trying to hold on to power. Like, this man is one of the most powerful people on earth. So if I was him, if I was like a 100-year-old fossil running for re-election and clearly not all there mentally, I would do the exact same thing that he's doing, because I'm not relinquishing that power. I'm one of the most powerful people on earth. I'm not relinquishing that. So I don't know necessarily if it's sad, unless he's like somebody else's puppet. But if we're assuming that he's acting on his own free will and is running again for re-election because he wants to, then I don't know. To me, that just shows that people just can't give up power. They're not going down without a fight. You know what I'm saying? Now, without further ado, let's get into the first law of power for women. So today we're discussing law number 1, which is don't be humble. And side note, these laws are not in order of importance. So just because this is first doesn't mean that it's the most important law. It's just in the order that I'm recording them. So order doesn't really matter. Okay, first things first, I'm going to ask a question. When you hear the word humble, do you associate that more with men or with women? I'm almost certain that it's women. And I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that humility is a trait that's celebrated in women, mostly by men. It's attractive for a woman to be humble, or a woman who isn't humble is seen as a narcissist or someone who's full of herself. And I think this is true to most contexts, like dating, career, athletics, even interpersonal relationships. Like, women are kind of penalized for not being humble. One of the biggest scams that we are fed as women is that being humble is somehow attractive and sexy, when in reality, you are doing yourself a disservice by being humble. Because we're taught that being humble means being quiet and not really talking about our achievements. But guess what? What can be seen doesn't exist, and people don't trust what they can't see. So if you don't highlight the things that you've accomplished, then they don't exist. And so, listen, ladies, humility can make you come off as a loser. That is the truth of the matter. If you're humble, you might be coming across as a loser. And the thing about humility is that it's a learned behavior. It's instilled in us socially and through culture and gender norms. So that means it can be unlearned. It is not the end of the world. If you are humble and you're acting like a loser, we can fix that. It's not the end of the world. So here's an example of how humility can undo your hard work and basically make you a nobody. So when you think of the discovery of electricity, which name comes to mind? It's probably Thomas Edison or maybe Benjamin Franklin. And side note, every time I think of Ben Franklin, it reminds me of that episode of The Office where they hired a Ben Franklin impersonator and everybody in the office thought that he was a stripper. I don't know why that just came to mind. But yeah, anyway, going back to my question. So when you think of discovery of electricity, whose name comes to mind? It's probably Thomas Edison. Like for me, that was the name that came to mind. I didn't even think of Ben Franklin until I actually was doing research for this episode. I'm like, what the hell does he have to do with electricity? But anyway, if Thomas Edison was the name that came to mind for you, or Ben Franklin, not to be confused with the stripper, then guess what? Nikola Tesla was the one who discovered the alternating current, which is the standard of electricity that's used today. And also, he was way hotter than Edison. Google their photos. Tesla was actually hot. Okay. So hold on. Smash or pass Nikola Tesla, Thomas Edison, and Benjamin Franklin. Definitely smash Tesla. Edison, pass. And you'll see why. Like, he's kind of an icky guy. And also, Ben Franklin looked like a lump of coal. So definitely pass on that one too. And please give me your smash or pass answers in the Q&A or in the comments because I want to know. And I feel like there's a right answer to this because the other two guys are ugly, okay? Okay, anyway, now that we got the important things out of the way, let's get back to this example. So, discovery of electricity. Nikola Tesla was the one who discovered the alternating current, and he played a huge role in pioneering the transmission and the generation of the alternating current. But his name is rarely associated with the discovery of electricity. At least it's not like one of those names that come to mind. You know, when you think of electricity, you probably think of Thomas Edison. And, you know, it's kind of rightful because Edison discovered the direct current, which isn't the standard that's used in buildings, but it is used in appliances and electronic devices. So he still played a role, but he was very vocal and forceful in inserting himself in that space. So there was beef. There was a huge beef between Tesla and Edison, okay? And in a nutshell, this is how it went down. So Tesla discovers the alternating current and turns to a wealthy businessman named George Westinghouse to get funding to file his patents. Edison had already discovered the direct current, and he was getting financial support from an even wealthier man, J.P. Morgan. So they both said sprinkle, sprinkle, and got their sugar daddies to fund their experiments and their research and their patents, okay? The alternating current takes off. Tesla is making bank because he's getting royalties and he becomes a millionaire. Meanwhile, Edison is watching Tesla's discovery triumph over his, and being the petty wackadoodle that he is, he decides to launch this huge PR campaign to try and sabotage Nikola Tesla. And this guy would do public electrocutions on cats and dogs using the alternate current to show that it's quote unquote unsafe. Like, this man even electrocuted an elephant at one point. Like, peak wackadoodle behavior, okay? Actually, fun fact, the electric chair was invented by Thomas Edison. Yeah. Anyway, Tesla fought back and he launched his own PR campaign to show that, you know, the alternating current is safe, and he would like basically electrocute himself with the alternating current to show people that, like, we're good, you know, we're Gucci. It's not going to kill you. As we know, when men fight, they act like it's life or death, and it takes forever, okay? So this beef went on for 20 years, and it actually pushed Westinghouse, the guy who was funding Tesla, it pushed him to bankruptcy. Kind of an ick. Like when your sugar daddy goes bankrupt, like man up, you had one job. But Edison, being backed by his sugar daddy JP Morgan, was doing just fine because man was in his sprinkle era and the funds were still coming in because JP Morgan was way richer than George Westinghouse. So Westinghouse goes to Tesla and does something that's even more ick, which is he asks Tesla if he can sort of lower or temporarily pause his royalties so that Westinghouse can pay off his debts and get back on his feet. And Tesla just straight up rips the contract and is like, I got you. And he basically just acts like a pick me. He acts like a pick me because he makes this huge discovery, does a bunch of research, and is a pioneer in basically one of the most important scientific discoveries. And he's like, no, it's okay. I don't need my royalties. So acted like a huge pick me. And he ends up getting a payout that's about $5.4 million in today's currency. But if he were to keep the contract and still get his royalties after Westinghouse got back on his feet, Tesla would have become the world's first billionaire. And his family would have still been getting the royalties today. So they're probably punching the air. So in the end, Westinghouse's name was the one that got associated with the alternating current, even though it was Tesla's work in discovering it. And Tesla was a very quiet, humble man. Some people called him a humble genius. I don't know what kind of genius scams himself out of billions of dollars, but okay. And although his discovery of the alternating current is literally one of the most important scientific discoveries ever, he didn't get the recognition that he deserved. While his wackadoodle rival got a lot more clout. Actually, while I was researching for this episode, I learned that Tesla liked hanging out with pigeons, which is also kind of giving crackhead behavior. And he didn't have a wife or a girlfriend, while Thomas Edison had multiple wives and 6 kids. So that man really put his electric current to use. But anyway, Tesla really didn't get the respect and recognition that he deserved. And he died broke. He literally died broke. And literally the first time I heard his name was in relation to the car company. Like I did not know who Tesla was until I realized that the car company is actually named after him. So yeah, but whatever. I'm just a girl, okay? Maybe y'all have heard of him. If you have, then great. But like I had no idea who this man was. Um, but yeah, so there you go. There is the humble genius who didn't get the money that he deserved and didn't get the recognition that he deserved for doing something huge. Okay. And I feel like the word humble genius is just synonymous now for pick me. So, all that to say, I'm using this example to paint a picture of how being humble can undo amazing work, can literally undo everything. So, if this man who made one of the most important scientific discoveries of all time did not get the recognition he deserved because he was being very humble, imagine what that means for the rest of us. So, what even is the purpose of being humble? It's usually to ensure that we don't offend other people. And offend other people with what? Our confidence and accomplishments. Why? Because our confidence and accomplishments remind them of what they aren't. And who are said people? Usually men, but also insecure women. The fact of the matter is that most people are insecure and they don't like themselves, and they're going to feel bad about themselves when you bring up your successes. Now, obviously, you don't want to surround yourself with losers, but when you find yourself in their presence, you have to avoid becoming like them. But the thing that actually happens when you're humble is you risk coming off as unaccomplished and unsuccessful. And you know what's crazy is that the dusties, the losers who are actually unaccomplished, are probably the ones who are boasting about themselves the most and going off about Bitcoin and their made up investments and blockchain, like all that nonsense. So, you know what? If I was a loser, I would probably pretend I got rich through my investments too. I would probably use the word Bitcoin a lot. Humility can also be mistaken for insecurity, especially if you are quiet, if you're a more reserved person, and insecurity drives people away. It's kind of an ick. So let's face it. There is someone who is already living the life that you want, who already has what you want, whose reality is what you are still dreaming of. If you're smart, you spend time studying them, and if you're dumb, you waste your time envying them. So, do you think that that person got there by being humble, by downplaying their skills and their strengths and their beauty? Hell no. It's usually not the best and the brightest who get places in life. It's the people who are the loudest. I feel like I'm now yelling and being part of the loudest. Okay, but I'm trying to get places. Okay, so look at Donald Trump, Elon Musk, for example. These are two people who are loud. They're loud. They are everywhere. And you can't deny that they are successful. Like, whatever you have to say about who they are as people, they are successful. They have a lot of money, more money than most people have in their entire lifetime. And they're also extremely powerful. There's a lot of words you can use to describe these people, but you cannot use the word humble. You can't. Okay? But look at them. Look where they're at. Look how much power they hold. So instead of wasting your breath by talking about how bad they are as people and how destructive they are, blah, 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 like, who cares? No one cares. Okay? They're going to still get that bag. They're going to get more power. They're going to buy more companies. They're going to ruin more countries, blah, 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 blah. Who cares? Study them. Study these people. Okay? The world is not going to change just because you make a post or you use a hashtag about how bad somebody is and how crooked they are and blah, 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 blah. Nothing is going to change. You need to study the people who are already where you want to be. You might not necessarily want to be where Donald Trump is, but you get what I'm saying. You need to study the people who've gotten to places, who've gotten to the pinnacles of success, who've gotten to the pinnacles of power and wealth, and understand what that underlying formula is. How did they get there? And I promise you, they did not get there by being humble, okay? I pinky swear. And there are probably tons of amazing things that you've done that no one knows about because you're trying to be humble. You're trying to be a lady. So, enough. By being humble, you are literally keeping people in the dark of your greatness and of the things that you have accomplished. And you're really just shooting yourself in the foot because somebody came along at some point in your life and told you, instilled this value in you that you have to be humble for some reason, that as a woman, that's what is expected of you, that's what's celebrated. And you listened, obviously not your fault, and you used that value throughout your life. And where did it get you? Probably didn't help you. It probably didn't help you. So take humility and throw it away. It's usually not something that's going to help you, okay? Are you humble when you're applying for a job? Are you humble during a job interview? Are you humble at work when you're trying to talk about a cool project that you did or a client that you landed or a big account that you secured? No, and if you are, then you're crazy. If you are, then you're dumb. Humility is not there to help you. Humility is there to control you and make you seem less accomplished and successful than you actually are. So use it at your own discretion. If you want to come off as a loser, if you want to be a loser, then by all means, be humble. Be my guest. Now, let me remind you of something. No one is going to highlight you and your accomplishments for you. If you think to yourself, oh, the right person will appreciate my humility, blah, 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 or some nonsense like that, then you're gaslighting yourself into being humble. And people are going to gaslight you anyway. Like, tons of people are going to be out there who are going to gaslight you throughout your life. So why are you adding onto the list of those people? No one is going to highlight your accomplishments for you. And if they do, it's usually because they're trying to indirectly brag about themselves. Like, for example, a manager at work who's always talking about how well their project is going, and, they give a shout out to somebody on their project team to highlight their work, like, oh, this assistant did a great job, or this junior whatever did a great job. When in reality, they're just trying to tell everyone that they're doing a great job by managing that project and by leading that staff. So no one is going to share your accomplishments out of the goodness of their heart. No one is going to come and say, oh, look what she did. Look what she accomplished. Look what she secured for our company, blah, 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 blah. Hell no. Hell no. No one is doing jack for you unless it serves them. So now you need to start thinking like those people. You need to start thinking about your own self-interest and whether or not being humble will serve that interest. Because there are some contexts, and I'm going to talk about that in a few minutes. There are some contexts where being humble could work. And sometimes you want to take a step back and not be very loud or vocal about your accomplishments. But it all boils down to this: what is in your self interest? What is going to help you get to your goals, achieve your dreams? If humility in that context is going to help you, then be humble. If bragging about your accomplishments and sharing the great things that you did is going to help you, then do that. But don't go around acting humble because as a woman, you've been taught that that's what you're supposed to do. Because that's how losers think, and that's how you'll just guarantee that you're not going to get anywhere in life that you want to be. So take control of the narrative. People will only highlight your greatness if it serves their self interest of showing how great they are. So take control of the narrative. You control how you want people to perceive you, not the other way around. If you let other people control the narrative, then you're at their mercy for when your accomplishments get highlighted and you've already lost. So this leads me to my next point, which is to know how to talk about yourself and to highlight your successes. You don't want to come across as cocky or a braggart because, like I said, insecurity drives people away, but so does cockiness. And it's also a turnoff when people humble brag. I feel like people who humble brag can commit to either shutting up altogether or explicitly sharing the things the right way. So they just end up in this weird in between thing that ends up just making them look like a douchebag. So you don't want to humble brag and you don't want to be cocky. The trait that drives people to you is your confidence and the way you know your worth and your value. It's all in your delivery, because a lot of the time cocky people have something worth bragging about too. It's just they're unsavory because their delivery sucks. Actually, side note, here's a would you rather. Would you rather be cocky and arrogant or be so humble that you come off as insecure? For me, honestly, I don't even think this is hard. I would rather be cocky, maybe even narcissistic. I'd rather be a narcissist than be a humble person because, first of all, you're controlling the narrative. Okay. People may or may not like you, but at least your accomplishments are out there in the world. And that can at least get you somewhere. If you're humble, you just look like a loser, you look insecure, and nobody knows what you've done. So that's not even going to help you. That's not going to serve you. But yeah, good thing I'm neither. I'm not a narcissist and I'm not humble. So you want to speak about your accomplishments in a way that is results driven, okay? And I don't want to sound corporate, but let's dissect this, okay? So let's say that I want to highlight that I could squat 330 pounds, okay? This is just me using an actual example. So the Neanderthal way of doing it is saying, I can squat 330 pounds. And you're probably saying it with a smug face. And if you say that in most contexts, people might want to punch you in the face. Like you might come across as a douchebag. So, how would you take that example and say it in a way that is more subtle, but that doesn't downplay your accomplishment? Because if I were to tell somebody, oh, I squat 330 pounds, like that could come across as me bragging, even though my goal is just to share that piece of information for whatever reason. So, let's talk about how to make it sound like you are not a complete jerk. So, the subtle way of saying it is, since I started competing in powerlifting, it's always been my goal to squat over 300 pounds. I think that's something that a lot of women want to do. And last year, after I think like 7 years of training, and also after really pushing my squat, I finally hit that goal and I squatted 330 pounds. All right, you see what I did there? So I mentioned that I compete in sport, brag number one. I mentioned how hard I train, brag number two. I mentioned how long I've been training, brag number three. And a sub brag, a mini brag to that is how patient and dedicated I am. Okay. And then finally, I mentioned that I squat 330 pounds. So brag number four. And I did that by making it sound like I had a goal, right? My goal was 300 pounds. And I completely blew that goal out of the water. Your delivery is so important because it could really make or break what you're saying. And you can either enhance what you're telling people or you can make yourself look like a Neanderthal. So it's really all in your delivery. Also, be mindful of your context and who you're speaking to and the environment that you're in, and use those context cues to evaluate whether it's appropriate to talk about your accomplishments or whether it's more appropriate for you to just shut up. Because being humble will help you in some contexts and in some circumstances. So you need to use context clues and you need to cater that to different environments that you're in. Okay. It's not a universal rule. And like most of the laws I'm going to talk about in future episodes, this is context dependent. So it's not universally applicable. Don't go around bragging and like talking about your accomplishments all the time because sometimes that might not be appropriate and it'll be counterproductive. Because at the end of the day, you're doing everything with the goal of promoting your self-interest. So when it's in your self-interest to talk about your success, then you will. And when it's in your self-interest to be quiet, maybe listen to other people, observe, maybe withhold information, then you're going to do that. The underlying current is self-interest. See how I used current? I used an analogy going back to the electricity example I talked about earlier. Yeah, that was not part of the script. That was ad-libbed. But ideally, you want to exude confidence so that you don't have to always talk about your accomplishments. People can just pick up on it just by being in your presence. You know what I mean? You know, those people who are so confident that just being around them, like, you know that they've done a lot. They don't have to say anything, they don't have to talk about what they've done. You just know that they've done some stuff. That is ideally how you want to be. And that's just a fantasy that you have to create. And it's not hard. It really isn't hard. When you want to sell the fantasy, you just have to picture the fantasy, become it, and sell it. Because at the end of the day, that's what these laws are about. It's about how you can sell the fantasy to get what you want. And it's not hard, guys. It's really not hard. So here's one way. This was law number one. Don't be humble, baby. Don't be humble. All right, let's recap, y'all. So, first things first, humility is a scam because it teaches women to be quiet and to figuratively take up less space. What can be seen doesn't exist, okay? And people don't trust what they can't see. So, if you don't highlight the things you've accomplished, then they don't exist in other people's eyes. How are they supposed to know something that they're not aware of? And if you look at a lot of the most powerful or successful people, they're not necessarily the smartest or the brightest. A lot of the time, they might actually be stupid, but they're almost certainly the loudest. And they're definitely not humble. Think of Thomas Edison. And being smart or doing something amazing doesn't necessarily mean you're going to get the recognition you deserve. Like our hot friend, Nikola Tesla. So it is really all up to you, babes. Like, no one is going to highlight your accomplishments for you unless it serves their self interest. And even in that case, they're the ones controlling the narrative. So they're presenting you in whatever light is going to make them look the best. So maybe serve your own self interest for a change. Now, I have a call to action for you ladies, okay? For the bad bitches. So think of somebody you know who's humble, but you know that they've done something amazing or that they're very accomplished. Although other people might not know that, okay? So it's information you're privy to, but other people aren't. And think of how that person might look to the people who have no idea about what they accomplished. Does that make sense? Like you have a humble friend, you know that she's done amazing things, but other people don't know that. Think of how she comes across. And honestly, maybe that person is you. So think about how you're coming across to other people if you're the one who's accomplished but humble and not sharing what you've done. And the reason why I'm suggesting you guys think of this is because a huge part of these laws is studying people who violate them so that you don't end up like them. Remember how earlier I said, don't waste time envying people who are where you want to be. Study them. So also study people who are at the opposite end of the spectrum, who are exactly where you don't want to end up, because you need to learn what they did to end up in that position so that you don't replicate it. And this kind of reminds me of that saying that George Bush said, fool me once, shame on you. You fool me, can't get fooled again. I don't even know, like that doesn't even fit here. I just wanted to say it. All right, first law of power is done, y'all. Thank you so much for tuning into this episode. Let me know your thoughts. Let me know if you have any examples. I would love to hear it. Let me know if you have any hot takes based on the stuff I'm saying. So yeah, any of that you want to share, my socials are in the show notes, or you can leave a comment on YouTube or use the Q&A on Spotify. And please answer the Smash or Pass with Tesla, Edison, and Ben Franklin. And if you like the episode, you can follow, like, subscribe, rate the podcast 5 stars. Obviously, if you want to, okay, the world is your oyster, it's your world. And don't forget that you are the baddest bitch in any building you step foot in, okay? Now, until next time, stay bad. Love you. Bye.